So the last bit we're going to work on for the foot is a pole vector. What is a pole vector? Well, a pole vector is why we used the RP solver for the IKs. You'll remember that we chose that one. And it has this extra function of, if I bend this, I can create a control that my knee points to, right? Rather than having a twist function on the foot itself, which you can use too. But I prefer this one. And to me, it's a little more intuitive, right? Like, I just move this, and that's where the knee points, right? So that's what we're going to be making here. Okay, so in order to get started with the pole vector, first we need a control. So I've got a nice little labeled PV and everything, and it's pointing towards the knee because the knee will eventually be pointing towards it. And it's going to be hovering in front of the knee, but I want it hovering directly in front of the knee. So the easiest way to do that is to hold down V and move it, not its pivot point, just the whole thing. Nope, that's not. There we go. Move it towards the center of the knee, and then just move it out however far you want. And this is very much sort of seasoned to taste. However big you want this to be, how far you want this away from the knee. Keep in mind that eventually you will be bending the foot. So it can't be so close that it interferes with where the foot is, because the idea is that the pole vector, you are pointing the knee towards it, or you're using it to aim the knee. So you can't have it going behind the knee, you can't have it going inside the leg. Alright, so we're going to float that out there, it's in line with it. And once I get it exactly where I want, obviously we need to freeze transformations. And we definitely need to delete history, because this is a compound shape, and I went through a lot of trouble making it, so there's a lot of history on it. Alright, so we've got it in front of the knee, and this is actually quite simple. We select the pole vector, and then we shift select the IK handle. And be very careful and make sure that is exactly what you selected. Check your hypergraph. And we go to constrain, and there's actually a pole vector constraint. And I click that, and that's it. I can select this, pull it up, right? And then when I select the pole vector, right? That is the point of this. Now keep in mind, this isn't rotating your foot. So, and when you're animating, know that your foot should usually be almost under your knee where your knee is pointed. So keep that in mind. Undo. There we go. Alright, so pole vector is pretty simple. Something to keep in mind for right now, it's going to get fixed later. If we were to move the whole character forward, alright, we have to be careful because we could easily walk away from our pole vector. Oh, well, he's not connected yet, so that's not going anywhere. There we go. See? We can walk away from our pole vector, and the knee flips around backwards, right? Because now the pole vector is over here, and the knee is starting to bend in the opposite direction. This is not a glitch in the rig. That's how it functions. If you were to walk in front of, your pole vector so that was behind you, that is what would happen. And sometimes people will tie the pole vector to the foot control so that it never gets behind them. Others will tie it to the hip joint. Others will still leave it alone. So we're going to make that decision later. But in many cases, it's up to the animator to make sure that it stays in the right place. So that is not a fault of your rig if, the character can move behind it. So don't think that there's something wrong there. So the one last thing we have to do, of course, is rename our control. So it's not just NURB circle 1. So we're going to call this left leg pole vector. We do need to specify that it's for the leg, because if you were ever using IK for the arms in a more complex rig, you would have pole vectors for those as well. And that should be it for the legs. Now remember, there really is no easy way, there is no simple way, no button in Maya to just transfer over all these groups we have here to the other foot. There's no way to transfer over the connections that are on these attributes to the other foot. There are ways to do that, but if you know them, then you've probably built your own auto rig and aren't listening to this lesson. Of course, through the magic of computer technology, I can get the next leg done more quickly. And actually, doing the second foot is a lot faster than the first one because you're doing it the second time. You've already got a feel for it. But here's the grouping structures over here in the hypergraph of both the left and the right leg. The pole vector controls are off on their own for right now. They'll go into the hierarchy eventually. But you can see there's 3 IK handles. We've got a pole vector constraint and a parent constraint for the whole foot group. And if we zoom out and over a little bit, we've got our 2 foot controls and then our joint chains starting at the root and then 2 chains for the legs. Now, these legs are very functional. They'll work perfectly well for most rigs, but they're not. If you were to be hired to make a rig for someone who is, say, making a short film or something like that, they are still missing a few bells and whistles. Not even bells and whistles. The main thing that they're missing is an IK-FK switch, an easy way to turn off the IK on these legs. That's a much more advanced thing. It requires 3 different joint chains, one for IK, one for FK, and one for actually deforming the model. So that would be more an advanced lesson that I'd get to once we finish this rig. One of the other things one could add that's more of a bell and whistle, it would be stretchy IK, where you can, get very cartoony and stretch the character out, or, make them a little more bendy, things like that. So there are always other things that can be added. Rigging is like art, it's really never finished. There's always more stuff you can add. The key is to know what you need for your project so that you're not adding too much. Feet like this have all the motion you need for most simpler projects, especially if it's your first crack at a demo reel and you need to be able to animate your character. You'll be able to get everything you need out of this. Alright, so that is all for the legs. Next up, we will be working on the spine for the character.